Good morning, students. Welcome to the IDT revision classes and back to the next chapter, time of supply. So, before going to the time of supply, so first of all, what is meant by time of supply? For example, Mr. A, he is the supplier, and Mr. B is the receiver, and he supply the goods on 1/1/2022. Goods supply on 1/1/2022. And here the invoice raised by the party, invoice issued on, for example, 15 to 2022, 15 to 2022, and the payment made by the party. Payment is on 1/4/2022. 1/4/2022. Here the three dates are there relating to the single supply. Relating to the single supply. So three dates are there. Then the question is, so which date is considered for the purpose of the due date for filing the return or due date for payment of the tax? And which date is assumed as a date of supply? Which date is assumed as a date of supply? So that is the question. So what is the date of supply among these dates that is provided by what? Time of supply, that is provided by what? Time of supply. So time of supply is nothing but the date on which the total supply deemed to be provided. The date on which total supply deemed to be provided is said to be what? Time of supply. So in this section, in this chapter, so we are going to discuss three sections. That is nothing but what? Section 12 is relating to time of supply in case of supply of goods, and section 13 is relating to time of supply in case of supply of services, and section 40 is relating to changing rate of tax, the situations relating to the changing rate of tax. Then what is the time of supply, then which rate is applied in case old rate is applied or new rate is applied. So we are going to discuss these sections. Then coming to the first one, section 12. So section 12 is relating to what? Time of supply in case of supply of goods. So in this section we have section 12.2 and 12.3 and 12.4 and 12.5 and 12.6. So section 12.2 is covered in the time of supply of goods in case of forward charge mechanism, and section 13 is relating to the time of supply in case of supply of goods in case of reverse charge mechanism, and this is relating to the voucher, time of supply in case of voucher, and this is relating to what? Residual entry or residual provision. And the last one, in case of any interest or late fee or any enhanced fees collected due to delay in payment of the tax, then what is the time of supply? Then what is the time of supply? That we are going to discuss under section 12. And the same thing in case of section 13, but that is in case of what? Supply of service. Here we are going to discuss in case of what? Supply of goods. So coming to the section 12, 2. So this is relating to what? Time of supply in case of supply of goods and the forward charge mechanism. In case of supply of goods and the forward charge mechanism. So here, what is the time of supply, sir? Time of supply is nothing but date of invoice, or date of invoice stands for date on which invoice raised by the supplier, or last date for raising the invoice or ought to be raised the invoice under section 31 of the CGST Act 2017, or date of receipt of payment. Date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier, this is said to be our time of supply. Okay, so the time of supply in case of supply of good is nothing but what? Date of invoice or last date for raising the invoice under section 31, or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier, is said to be a what? Time of supply. Here, what is meant by date of invoice? Date of invoice is nothing but date on which invoice raised by the supplier is said to be a date of invoice. And coming to the last date for raising the invoice under section 31, last date for raising the invoice under section 31. So that is actually we will discuss in tax invoice, debit note and credit note. But here, so coming to the supply of goods, coming to the supply of goods as per section 31, in case of supply of goods, what is the last date for raising the invoice? So we will discuss here. So in case of forward charge mechanism, in case of forward charge mechanism, so which involves movement of the goods, which involves movement of the goods, the last date for raising the invoice is nothing but the last date for raising the invoice is nothing but on or before date of removal of the goods, on or before date of removal of the goods for the further supply. So, and for example, if the goods not involving goods not involving movement of the goods, not involving the movement, then the last date is nothing but sorry, date on which the product came to available for utilization. Date on which the product came to available for utilization is the last date for raising the invoice. So for example, so here Mr. A is a furniture dealer and he supplied the goods to the Mr. B. So here the last date for raising the invoice in this case before removal of the goods from the place of the furniture from the place of the supplier, because that involves what? Movement of the goods. But coming to the goods not involving movement of the good, coming to the goods not involving movement of the good, like for example, in case of immovable property or some plant and machineries are there. So the individual parts are brought to the site and those are assembled at the site, installed at the site. And then, so the date of last date for raising the invoice in that case is nothing but when that immovable property came to available for utilization, that is said to be last date for raising the invoice. And then, in case of a reverse charging mechanism, in case of reverse charging mechanism, what is the last date? So the date of receipt of goods by the receiver. The date of receipt of goods by the receiver is said to be about the last date for raising the invoice. Last date for raising the invoice. And another one is in case of a continuous supply of goods. So what is meant by continuous supply of goods? So if the supplier agreed to supply the goods continuously or on recurring basis through any mode where the payments are agreed to receive on installment basis is said to be about a continuous supply of goods. Said to be about continuous supply of goods. So in that case, what is the last date? So last date is nothing but so either on or before the date of statement issued by the supplier or date of receipt of payment. Date of receipt of payment is considered. If the statements are issued by the party regularly, then date of statement is said to be a last date for raising the invoice. If there is no statement, then date of receipt of payment is considered. Date of receipt of payment is considered. And then if the goods sent on sale or approval the goods sent on sale or approval, then what is the last date for raising the invoice? Is nothing but the date of date on which supply has been taken place, or 6 months from the date of removal of the good, whichever is earlier. So here, remember, date on which supply has been taken place is nothing but in case of goods sent on sale or approval, the transaction is deemed to be a supply only when the goods are accepted by the receiver, or if no information is provided regarding the acceptance or rejections within the due date before the due date, then those are treated as that date is said to be date on which supply has been taken place, or 6 months from the date of removal of the good, whichever is earlier. So this is said to be a section 31. So it is relating to what is the last date for raising the invoice as per section 31 in case of supply of goods. In case of supply of goods, in case of forward charge mechanism, reverse charge mechanism, and continuous supply of goods and goods sent on sale or approval basis, we discuss. So coming to this one, so here what is the time of supply in case of supply of goods under forward charge mechanism is nothing but date of invoice or last date for raising the invoice as per section 31, or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. So here, so what is meant by date of receipt of payment? Generally, date of receipt of payment is nothing but, for example, if the amount paid in cash by the receiver, then the date of receipt of payment is nothing but the date on which cash is received. But the question is, if the amount paid by the party in check, if the amount paid by the party in check, so then what is meant by date of receipt of payment? In that case, the date of receipt of payment is nothing but the on which date on which entry for payment is recorded in the books of supplier, or date on which entry for payment is recorded in the books of supplier, or date on which amount is credited in the bank account of the supplier, whichever is early. The date on which date on which amount is entry for payment is recorded in the books of the supplier, and date on which amount is credited in the bank account of the supplier, whichever is earlier is said to be what date of receipt of payment. And remember, in case of part payments received and some payment received at present and the remaining payment agreed to pay after some period, then we have to apply the time of supply to the extent of the payment received or to the extent of the invoice raised, not on the whole amount, not on the whole amount. That is very, very important in case of time of supply. And another one is, so in case of advance payments. So if any advances received, advance payments by the receiver. So in case of advance payment by the receiver, then what is the time of supply? Generally, if you apply in case of advance payment, if you apply this provision, then what is the time of supply? Date of receipt of payment is considered. Date of receipt of payment is considered. But in case of advance payment, that provision is not applied. This provision is not applied. So don't consider the time of supply as a date of receipt of payment. In that case, we have to consider what is the time of supply. Time of supply is nothing but what? Date of invoice, or last date for raising the invoice as per section 31, whichever is earlier. Whichever is earlier, that is said to be a time of supply. That is said to be a time of supply. So remember, this provision is applied only in case of advance payment by the receiver under forward charge mechanism. In case of others, this provision is not applied. And that too, this provision is applied only in case of supply of goods, not under supply of services. Not under supply of services. Clear? So in case of advance payment, the time of supply is not the date of receipt of payment. The time of supply is nothing but so date of invoice or last date for raising the invoice as per section 31, whichever is earlier is said to be a last is said to be a time of supply. Is said to be a time of supply. This is about what time of supply in case of supply of goods and a forward charge mechanism. Then, so coming to the next one, section 12.3 is nothing but what time of supply in case of supply of goods. Time of supply in case of supply of goods under reverse charge mechanism. Here, so what is the time of supply? So remember, in case of reverse charge mechanism, the time of the payment of the tax is in the hands of the receiver, not by the supplier. So we have to calculate the time of supply from the point of view of the receiver, not from the point of view of the supplier. So in this case, so what is the time of supply? What is the time of supply? The time of supply is nothing but what? So date of receipt of goods or date of payment or 31st day from the date of invoice, whichever is L. Okay, so date of receipt of goods or date of payment or 31st day from the date of invoice. Here, what is meant by date of payment? Already we discussed. But here from the point of view of the receiver, not from the point of view of the supplier, how to calculate? So the date of payment is nothing but date on which entry for payment is recorded in the books of receiver or date on which amount is debited in the bank account of the receiver, whichever is earlier. So in case of forward charge mechanism, we calculate the date of payment from the point of view of the supplier, not from the point of view of the receiver. So in this case of reverse charge mechanism, we have to calculate the date of payment from the point of view of the receiver, not from the point of view of the supplier. And 31st day from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier. And even in case of the advance payment, and in case of the advance payment, so this provision is only applied. The date of payment is said to be a time of supply. So because in case of advance payment, so this payment, this provision is applied only in case of forward charge mechanism, not applied in case of reverse charge mechanism. And remember one thing, this provision is applied only for those dealers other than composite dealer, other than composite dealer. In case of composite dealer also date of payment is considered. Okay. This is under what? Reverse charge mechanism. So then coming to the section, so 12.4. So in case of the voucher. So first of all, what is meant by voucher? Voucher is nothing but what? It is an instrument which is considered as a consideration for part payment or full payment in return for supply of goods or in return for supply of services is said to be our voucher. So generally nothing but what coupons. So in case of voucher, you have to verify whether supply has been identified at the time of issue of voucher or not, at the time of issue of voucher or not. If the supply is identified or not identified. If the supply is identified at the time of issue of voucher, for example, you received shirt coupon. You received what? Shirt coupon. Then by using the shirt coupon, which item you can purchase? Only shirts. We can identify the nature of the supply at the time of issue of voucher. In that case, what is the time of supply? The time of supply is nothing but what? Date of issue of voucher. So, but for example, coming to the trends, so trends showrooms are there. They issue the coupons. So, if you purchase the goods, if you purchase the clothes, if you purchase the ready-made items worth more than or equal to 1500, then you will get a 500 worth of the discount. And further, they issue the voucher. And by using at the time of issue of the voucher, we cannot identify which item we are going to purchase. By using that voucher, you can purchase either shirts, pants, or any item which is available in the trends. So the product is not identified at the time of issue of voucher. Then what is the time of supply here? Date of redemption of date of redemption of voucher. Clear? So in case of voucher, what is the time of supply? If the supply is identified at the time of issue of voucher, the time of supply is nothing but what? Date of issue of voucher. If the supply is not identified at the time of issue of voucher, the time of supply is nothing but what? Date of redemption of voucher. Date of redemption of the voucher. Then coming to section 12.5. Coming to what? Section 12.5. So section 12.5, so is nothing but what? This is the residual section. So if it is not possible to calculate what is the time of supply, if it is not possible to calculate what is the time of supply by using the above provisions, then the time of supply is calculated, applied by using section 12.5. By using section 12.5. So as per this, if the party liable for filing return, then the due date for filing the return is said to be a time of supply. And in case of others, the date of payment of GST is said to be about time of supply. In case of others, what is the time of supply? The date of payment of GST is said to be about time of supply. Is said to be about time of supply. Clear? So, and then next one, section 12.6. So then section 12.6 is applied. For example, supplier supply the goods on credit basis to the receiver. On that supply made have what credit basis, and the receiver both are entering into an agreement, and receiver agreed to make the payment within 45 days. And there is a clear provision is there, if the party unable to make the payment within 45 days, then after that he has to pay the amount along with interest at the rate 10%. So he made the payment at 180 day, 180th day. He made the payment at 180th day. Then what is the difference is there? So in between 45 to 180 day, on and average 135 days are there. For that he has to pay the interest. For that excess payment, what is the time of supply? The time of supply is nothing but the date of receipt of that additional amount. The date of receipt of that additional amount like interest, penalty, late fee, charges, etc. Okay, so this is relating to what? Supply of goods. So section 12.2 is relating to what? So supply of goods under forward charging mechanism. Section 12.3 is relating to supply of time of supply in case of supply of goods under reverse charging mechanism. Section 12.4 is relating to the time of supply in case of a voucher, and section 12.5 is relating to the residual provision. Section 12.6 is relating to the if any enhanced or additional payment received due to the delay in payment by the receiver, then what is the time of supply is covered under section 12.6. Section 12.6. So this is about what time of supply in case of supply of goods. Then coming to the time of supply in case of supply of services covered under section 13. Covered under what? Section 13. So in case of section 13 also, 13(2) is applied in case of forward charging mechanism. Section 13(3) is applied in case of supply of services and reverse charging mechanism. Section 13(4) is applied in case of voucher, and section 13(5) is applied in case of what residual provision, and section 36 is relating to what additional payment received due to the delay in payment. Delay in payment. And remember here, in case of section 12(4), 12(4), and 12(5), 12(6), and 13(4), 13(5), 13(6) provisions are same. So 12(4), 12(5), sorry, 12(6), and 13(4), 13(5), 13(6). So these are same, but these are applied in case of supply of good. These are applied in case of supply of services. That is only the difference. In case of the voucher relating to the supply of services, if the supply is identified at the time of issue of voucher, the time of supply is nothing but what date of issue of that voucher. So if the supply is not identified at the time of issue of voucher, the time of supply is nothing but date of redemption of that voucher. Date of redemption of that voucher. For example, if you have the food coupons or if you have the grocery coupons, so then which item you can purchase by using that coupon in the respected stores. So you may purchase anything. So the grocery you are going to purchase is not identified at the time of issue of voucher. So in that case, the time of supply is nothing but date of redemption of that voucher. But in case of, for example, so service coupons are provided by the motor vehicle company. Then by using that service coupon, we can identify the supply because we can receive the general service relating to the bike. So here the time of supply is nothing but date of issue of the voucher. So in case of residual provision, what is the time of supply? If the party liable to file the return, the time of supply is nothing but what due date for filing the return. Otherwise, the time of supply is nothing but date of payment of the GST. And in case of additional payment, any excess amount received due to the delay in payment, so by the receiver, like in the form of interest or late fee or charges, etc., the time of supply is nothing but date of receipt of that additional amount. So these provisions are same, but section 12(4), 5(6) is applied in case of supply of good. Section 13(4), 5(6) is applied in case of supply of services, but only the difference is relating to supply of goods, services under forward charge and reverse charge. We are going to discuss these two only here. Okay. Then, in case of section 13(2), so is relating to what supply of services. In case of forward charge mechanism, means we have to specify from the point of view what supply, from the point of view what supply. So in that case, so what is the time of supply? It depends upon if if invoice is a rise within 30 days from the date of completion of service. If invoice is not raised within 30 days from the date of completion of service. In this case, if invoice is raised within 30 days, then what is the time of supply? The time of supply is nothing but what? Date of receipt of payment or date of invoice, whichever is earlier. Date of receipt of payment or date of invoice, whichever is earlier. So here date of receipt of payment is set. In case of cash, the date on which cash received, that is set to be date of receipt of payment. In case of check, if the party made the payment by check, then date of receipt of payment is nothing but what? Date on which entry for receipt of payment is recorded in the books of supplier, or date on which amount is credited in the bank account of the supplier, whichever is earlier. So if the invoice is not raised within 30 days from the date of completion of service, then time of supply is nothing but what? Date of receipt of payment or date of completion of service, whichever is early. Date of receipt of payment or date of completion of service, whichever is earlier, is said to be what? Time of supply. Is said to be what? Time of supply. And in case of advance payment, in case of advance payment, so what is the time of supply? So whether the previous provision is applied, what we discussed in the forward charging mechanism in case of supply of good. In that case, for advance payment, the date of receipt of payment is not the time of supply. The time of supply is nothing but date of invoice or last date for raising the invoice, whichever is earlier. That provision is not applied here. So in this case, the date of receipt of payment itself is the time of supply. He clearly stated that provision is applied only in case of supply of goods, not in case of supply of services. Next. So if invoice is raised within 30 days from the date of completion, the time of supply is date of receipt of payment or date of invoice, whichever is earlier. If invoice is not raised within 30 days from the date of completion, date of receipt of payment or date of completion of service, whichever is earlier, is said to be a time of supply. Next, section 13(3) and is applied in case of what? Time of supply in case of a reverse charge mechanism. So, in case of reverse charge mechanism, so what is the reverse charge mechanism? Those are applied under section 9(3) and section 9(4) services. Section 9(3) and section 9(4) services. So, here what is the time of supply? So, in case of in case service received from the associated enterprise or the relative, so in case of service received from the associated enterprise or relative which are located who from the relative located outside India, located outside India, then what is the time of supply? What is the time of supply? Here the time of supply is nothing but, so here the time of supply is nothing but date of payment or date on which date on which entry for service is recorded in the books of a receiver, whichever is earlier. So the date of payment or a date on which entry for service is recorded in the books of the receiver is said to be our time of supply. And in case of others which are covered under reverse charge mechanism, the time of supply is nothing but what? Date of payment or or 61st day from the date of issue of invoice, whichever is earlier. So date of payment or 61st day from the date of issue of invoice, whichever is earlier, that is said to be our time of supply. So in case of services received from, it means importation of services from the associated enterprise or relative party, then time of supply is nothing but what? Date of payment or date on which entry for service is recorded in the books of the receiver. In case of others, the time of supply is nothing but date of payment or 61st day from the date of invoice, whichever is earlier. This is said to be our time of supply. And relating to section 13(4), 13(5), so 13(5), 13(6), the same will apply. So section 34, identify based on identification of supply on the date of issue of voucher. If we identify, then time of supply is date of issue of voucher or not date of redemption of that voucher. 13(5), If the party are eligible for filing the return, the due date for filing the return is said to be a time of supply. In case of others, the date of payment of GST is said to be a time of supply. In case of additional payment, the date of receipt of that additional payment is said to be what? Time of supply. Is said to be what? Time of supply. This is about section 13. Okay, section 12 is relating to what? Supply, time of supply in case of supply of goods. Section 13 is relating to what? Time of supply in case of supply of services. The last one, section 14. In case of change in rate of tax. In case of change in rate of tax. So what is meant by time of supply? So here generally for this purpose, three poles are considered, three elements, that is nothing but what? Date of completion of service and date of invoice and date of receipt of payment. And based on that, we are going to discuss what is the time of supply. What is the time of supply? So, for example, if the service is provided before completion of service, if service is provided before completion of service but invoice is raised before completion of service but payment received after completion of service. If the service is provided before completion of service, if the supply has been made before completion of service and invoice raised before completion of service and the payment is made after completion of service, then what is the time of supply? Date of invoice. Rate of invoice. If the service is provided before completion of service, before change in rate of tax, invoice is made after change in rate of tax, and receipt of payment is made before change in rate of tax. So here we have to consider date of completion of service is before change in rate of tax or after change in rate of tax. So if it is before, then verify the rest of the two things which is before, that is said to be a time of supply. If it is after, then verify the rest of the two things which is after, that is said to be a time of supply. For example, nothing is relating to the respected pole, the time of supply is among them whichever is earlier. So here the supply has been made before change in rate of tax, but invoice is made after change in rate of tax, and the receipt of payment is made before change in rate of tax. So what is the time of supply? Date of receipt of payment. So here the base is this one. So among these two others, which is before date of receipt of payment. So that is the time of supply. And so, for example, if it is a supply has been made before change in rate of tax, but invoice is made after, and receipt of payment is also made after change in rate of tax. So here, among the rest of the two things, date of invoice and date of receipt of payment, nothing else belongs to the date of completion. So the time of supply is nothing but what? Date of invoice or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Date of invoice or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Next, if the service is the supply has been made after, invoice has been made after, and the receipt is made before change in rate of tax, then so here we are going to discuss after change in rate of tax. In that case, among the two, which belongs to the after, that is said to be a time of supply, nothing but date of invoice. If completion, so supply has been made after change in rate of tax and invoice is made before and the receipt of payment is made after change in rate of tax, then what is the time of supply? Date of receipt of payment. If the completion service supply has been made before changing, sorry, after changing rate of tax and invoice has been provided before and the receipt of payment is also provided before changing rate of tax, the time of supply is nothing but what? Date of invoice or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier. Date of invoice or date of receipt of payment, whichever is earlier, that is said to be what? Time of supply. Then the question is, sir, which rate is applied? So old rate is applied or new rate is applied? So old rate or new rate is applied. So rate of tax. So rate of tax, old rate or new rate. Then So in that case, verify these three poles. Verify these three poles. So if the majority polls, so the three factors are the three elements are the date of completion of supply, date of invoice, and date of receipt of payment. So remember in this way. So if majority of the three elements belongs to before, then old rate is applied. If majority of the three elements belongs to after, then new rate is applied. So in that case, in the first scenario, this is before, this is before, this is after. Then among them, which is majority belongs to what before. So then old rate is applied. In this case, second scenario, majority belongs to before, then old rate is applied. In the third scenario, majority belongs to after, so new rate is applied. New rate is applied. Then in this scenario, majority belongs to after, so new rate is applied. In this scenario, majority belongs to after, so new rate. In this majority belongs to before, so old rate is applied. Okay, so this is about section 14. So in case of which rate of tax is applied, so old rate is applied or new rate is applied depends upon majority of the points belongs to before or after. If the majority belongs to the before changing rate of tax, then old rate is applied. If the majority belongs to the after changing rate of tax, then new rate is applied. So this is about section 12, 13 and 14. Section 12, 13 and 14. So that is relating to what? Okay. So that is relating to time of supply. So section 12 belongs to supply of goods. Section 13 belongs to supply of services. Section 14 belongs to change in rate of time. Okay. Thank you.